And Sports Betting 101 podcast continues here, and Joe is with us from PlayIllinois.com. And Joe, this week we're going to be talking about parlays. And I guess the first thing to start at is, what's a parlay?
Yeah, so a parlay is when you bet two or more games. Often it can be a ton. It can be up to 12 or whatever you want it to be. And you need all of those bets to win. And I guess it doesn't have to be games. It can be prop bets. It can be spreads. But yeah, it's basically betting two or more things to happen, and all of them need to happen in order for you to take home money.
Do you know how they set the odds on those parlays? Because it seems really strange. Sometimes when you take favorites, it's not that big, where if you take underdogs, they set huge. Is there a formula for how they set the odds on parlays?
So it's basically if you're in a sportsbook app, let's say, and you pick three games that are minus 110, I can't do the formula myself, but it's pretty easy to just plug in and see how much money you can win. So for example, if you bet three minus 110 things to happen, I think that comes out to be about plus 600. And that's just the probability that all three things will happen at the end of the day in the eyes of the odds maker. So I don't know what the exact formula is, but essentially it's just mashing all of the odds together of the things that you took and seeing how likely all of them are to happen. And then it spits out an odds total, and that's what it is.
I've read so many things about pros saying stay away from parlays. Some of them say it's okay as long as you know what's going on. What is this advice on parlays? Is it good to play those, or should you just play single bets?
I can see both sides of that. I would just caution, well, I guess I'll back up. The reason not to do a parlay is because it's really hard to win one. It's a real boom or bust proposition. However, there is the chance to turn, $5 into thousands of dollars if you hit the right parlay. And I mean, that's super unlikely. So it's kind of just whatever your risk reward calculation is. I'm personally not opposed to throwing, a little bit, like $5, $10 on something that you could see hitting, even if however unlikely. Those who are detractors of it would just say it's extremely unlikely that you're going to hit something that is significant. I mean, it's hard enough to win one bet in sports betting, as even if you're just betting normal sides, minus 110, whatever. It's extremely hard. So imagine, if you have a 3-0 day, that's a really good day, but that's also really rare. So if you really want to spend a decent amount of money trying to, hoping and praying that all 4, 5, 6 of your bets hit, go ahead, but that's really difficult. But I do think that in the right setting, and everyone's situation is different, there is a time where it can happen. And look, sometimes it's just for fun, and it's a real boom or bust proposition. And I have friends who have won. Excuse me. Sorry, I put like $10 on something and one came away with several thousands. But that's really rare, and you're probably going to hit those, super rarely. So yeah, it's just a risk reward calculation. And in general, I stay away from them, but I think every now and then it's okay.
I almost compare parlays to horse racing superfecta or something along those lines, where you take a shot at a bunch of numbers. If you think you know about one game or two, you kind of wheel them in with a couple others and you can hit a big payday. Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, I think it is. I think one thing that people do, for example, is you can bet, 7 favorites on the money line. And so in theory, all 7 of those games are likely to hit, right? Because you have minus odds on all of them. They are all the favored teams, and you're just taking them to win, not to cover the spread. However, when you do 7 or 8 of them, the odds against something unlikely happening stack up. But I also think that, each of those games in a vacuum is likely to hit. So I definitely see the argument for taking something like that.
Now, how big of a parlay can you make? Is it unlimited, or is there limits to it?
It depends on the book. Most of the legal sports books, which we advocate for using the legal sports books, there will be limits. I don't know, because personally I have not placed a big enough one to do that. So I'm not sure what they are, but I have seen reports of books, limiting if you're putting over $100, let's say, on a parlay that can hit like 10 figures. But in general, these books will take these parlays, and you want to know why? Because you're probably going to lose. So they're happy to take your money in most cases. And in the long run, people are placing these parlays, and more likely than not, the DraftKings, PointsBets, et cetera, of the world are going to take the money. But I do think there is a point where if it is going to be too much of a liability to the book, and a liability is just what they might have to pay if they actually lose. I've seen reports of people being limited, but again, that can also depend, and this is a whole nother can of worms, but this can depend on the bettor. these places can take a look at who is placing the wager and see what your wagering history is. And if you're good and hit a lot of your bets, then it wouldn't be shocking to see you limited at some places. If you're a consistent loser, they may seize that opportunity and take your parlay no matter what it is. So it's not an exact science. It's more of an art. But yeah, I think in general, you're probably not going to be able to put $1,000 parlays down at the legal sports books. But I mean, you never know. It's not a firm rule, so to speak.
Yeah, those worms are actually interesting there, is that you opened up in the can there. Do they monitor what you do as far as sports betting goes? Is that really closely monitored by these books?
That's the subject of much discussion. I've seen reports just of people online and people I know anecdotally who have been limited by certain places. I know Bet Rivers, for one, has limited some of my friends. I don't think it's like I don't know if you saw that Netflix documentary about how they're watching your every move. It's nothing like that, but I think if you are winning and over and over again, I think that maybe that can cause some alarm bell, or not alarm bells, but they'll be aware. Most of us don't have that problem, so that's fine. I don't think it's like a huge thing, but I think in extreme instances of someone who's betting a ton of money and winning a ton of money, that may, not like you're doing anything wrong. It's more just, the sportsbook have the power to limit you if they want to, and they oftentimes will.
Right, good stuff, Joe. Now let's get your lock for the week. What are we betting on today?
Oh, well, my lock last week, as we know, turned into the quarterbackless Broncos against the Saints. Let's see. I am going to go with the Bengals plus 11.5. And honestly, I don't know if I have a real lock. I actually have a couple of picks that I like this week. The Bengals are one of them. I just think that 11.5 points is a lot for Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Dolphins, and I love me some Ryan Fitzpatrick. But I also just think the Bengals have been keeping games close this year. Brandon Allen didn't look great under center in his last game, but they still covered with ease. And I just think 11.5 points for a team that has been competitive against an opponent that, while good, is no juggernaut, certainly. I think that's too much. So give me the Bengals. And
finally, Joe, how about some love for the sweet Kraken jersey, huh?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I noticed that when you hopped on. That's sweet. Not as cool as my March Madness live vest, but what are you going to do?
Okay, well, you'll have to wear that one next week or something like that. Joe, as always, good stuff. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for having me.